Hello and welcome to the video lecture for Module 3. You've made it. We've gotten past the first two modules. Week 1 where we've had some reading. Week 2 where you had your first speech, which is awesome. Hopefully you can see now kind of how the format of this class will work. If not, if you're uncomfortable, if you're still uncertain, please email me. I definitely want to make sure that we're all on the same page so that we get all the learning squeezed out of this class that we possibly can. So, a brief lecture, and today we're looking at chapters 5 and 11 in your textbook. Chapter 5 starts on page 35, chapter 11 starts on page 89, and really this is setting you up for your your second speech, really, the informative speech. In the informative speech, you're going to move far past talking about just yourself. Use you as a springboard to pick a topic, but you're really going to present some facts, some research, some ideas that are not your own to present and inform us about a specific topic that you're passionate about. And the word topic is the big word that we're going to start out with today because that's really key. Every speech has a topic, and you might say, well, duh. But selecting a topic is actually not as easy as it might sound. The purpose of a speech is to really get across a topic, whether it's to inform about a topic, to persuade you on a topic, to kind of highlight and interrogate or critique a topic. There's a lot you do with a topic, but selecting a topic is always your first step. So how in the world do you select a topic? And it really first starts with a self-inventory. Who are you? What are you interested in? And what do you know about? Just to give you a little bit of an idea about who I am, in addition to teaching, I'm also a communication researcher. I really research the ways in which gender and sexuality kind of influence the ways in which we communicate. So that's something I know a lot about because I've spent a lot of time really getting in, digging deep, reading a lot of what other people have to say about it. So when I pick a topic, it's likely going to stem from something I'm interested in, like that. I might talk about wage gaps. I might talk about body image, which is something I'm really passionate about. I might talk about masculinity. And really, I could take those in 1,000 different directions. So knowing you is a good first step. You want to personalize a topic. Make it applicable to you. I really recommend using the media, and I think your textbook does as well. Use the media to see what's going on in the world. When we think back over the last couple years, there are a lot of major things that have happened. Flights have disappeared out of the sky. Ebola has been a worldwide health epidemic. The AIDS crisis is continuing to grow, not only in undeveloped regions, but also in developed regions. There's still no cure. We could go on and on and on and on and on and on. Think about what's going on around you. Don't just give a speech on that. Think about some of the issues that are assumed when people present that topic in the media. Above all, pick a topic that's interesting, relevant, and something you know a lot about. Don't pick an unfamiliar topic. These can be really, really good. If you want to learn more about them, sure, give a speech on it. But often then you're so focused on getting the content across, content you probably don't understand to the depths that you should, that you're not really focusing on how to deliver a speech. So picking a familiar, comfortable topic that you're knowledgeable about will help you. Always keep in mind constraints. There are constraints. Certain topics can be talked about in a certain amount of time. Now, I likely cannot talk about the history of Ebola in 5 to 7 minutes. That's just not going to happen. But I might talk about what happened in 2014 with the Ebola crisis in West Africa and how it expanded to the United States and the health hysteria that it caused. That's just a random example. You don't have to do anything that in depth. But you see how the time constraints would dictate how much or the breadth of which I'm able to cover a topic. Always make sure that you're getting information across within those time frames. There's some information that you'll never be able to get across because other people aren't going to have the same amount of knowledge as you. They're not going to have the same learning curve. They're not going to have the same background, the same ideology. So take that into account. Remember, you're giving a speech to an audience. Get that information across in a way that is meaningful to them. This involves doing an audience analysis, which is quite simply just taking an inventory of who your audience is. What is their age? If you were going to give a speech on the need for the expansion of sex education in the United States, how you would give that speech to 12-year-olds would differ significantly from how you would give that speech to 92-year-olds, right? Keep in mind gender. Despite our view of equality between the sexes, this is not really the case. Women are still systematically the targets of discrimination. So make sure that you don't assume that men and women have the same orientation to the world, because women have traditionally had to fight harder to make it in corporate America. To be fair, men have also had to fight pretty hard to be domestic. We see the rise of stay-at-home dads, and that's not really legitimized in the public's view. So that's a problem as well. But keep in mind the worldwide or at least national assumptions of what men are supposed to do and what women are supposed to do, and make sure you're taking into account how your audience might feel about that. Think about the culture. Again, if you were giving a speech on Ebola, how you would give that speech to an audience predominantly from West Africa would differ significantly from an audience from the United States. The audience's size, their education level, their occupation, giving a speech to other students versus giving a speech to a room full of professors, a little bit of a different situation, right? And keep in mind, above all, with your audience is the focus. So spend a lot of time analyzing who they are. So as you can see, there's a lot of things to think about. You got to think about your audience. You got to think about your topic. And another thing I really want you to think about is your thesis. So hopefully by now you've taken maybe an English course, maybe another comms course in college where you've really helped develop thesis statements, or you've had help developing thesis statements. Maybe you haven't. So if not, revert back to high school and think about what you know. You have to take a topic and come up with a topic, yes, but you also have to bring it down. And this is where your thesis comes in. Your thesis is really the purpose of a speech. So a thesis statement is taking this really huge, broad topic and boiling it down to one sentence. If you're giving a speech on Ebola, Ebola is not a thesis. Ebola is a topic. A thesis might look something like this. In 2014, the Ebola crisis hit crazy epidemic proportions in the United States. This health disparity showed us a lot about the weaknesses in the United States healthcare system. So really, those are kind of two sentences, but it's a complete declarative thought unit. I think your textbook says it should be one sentence, but with a speech, it doesn't always work like that. In writing, it's easy to boil it down to one sentence, but the artistic quality of speaking is a lot different than the artistic quality of writing. So don't get caught up in whether it's a sentence, two sentences, maybe even four sentences. Regardless, your thesis is the central idea of a speech. Make sure that central idea is super, super clear. Starting on page 39 of your textbook and going to the end of that chapter, there's a lot of detailed information about how to construct a good thesis. Please make sure you spend a lot of time reading that, and always ask questions if you're not sure what a thesis of your speech might look like. So this leads us to informative speaking, which is chapter 11. You'll notice on page 89 that the textbook highlights a lot of features of the informative speech, specifically what a thesis statement to an informative speech might look like a little bit more specifically. When you're giving an informative speech, the purpose is to relay some information to people who probably don't know a lot about that information. So in your informative speech that you're going to give, I want you to present us with something new. Don't inform us about something we all know and love. I don't know. I can't give us a perfect example. But think about what's going on around you. Think about what's meaningful to you. Think about what's going on in the world, and give us something new. There are major ideas or things that you need to do or to think about before you give an informative speech. Number one is to focus on clarity. When you select a topic, think about how clearly you're going to be able to relay that information. If the topic is super technical in nature, it might not lend itself well to this speech. If it's too broad, you're going to have to narrow it. You might have to define some specific terms. You might have to explain things for us a little more clearly. All this can be solved if you just have simply a well-worded, clear, articulate thesis statement. So also keep in mind the audience's level of understanding and who the audience is. Do they know anything about this? If so, do they have maybe a belief system about what you're going to say? How are you going to address that? Always analyze the audience very, very deeply. There are a lot of guidelines for informative speaking, starting on page 90 of your text and actually going through the end of the chapter. Textbook highlights kind of how you can go through the process of selecting a topic, assessing the audience, using specific language to get your point across, adapting the topic to the audience. Those are really, really good bits of information, so you really need to read those in the textbook. If you're not sure at this point what an informative speech looks like, your textbook also really gives you an idea of some of the things you might do. You might explain a process. You might describe a person. You might describe an animal. You might describe a place, describe an object, describe a structure, describe an event. You see, a lot of this is description because this is about relaying information. So you have a lot of flexibility. Please make sure that your topic is approved by me. Follow the instructions in the module to get your topic approved. And if you have questions, as always, please ask me. But I want you to really start thinking critically about speech and public speaking and how it might be able to make a difference in somebody's life. Select topics that are meaningful, that address real problems in society. We'll talk a little bit more about the role of public speaking in a democracy and in social well-being in a few weeks. But think critically about the topics you select, and as always, email me with any questions. Until next time, bye-bye.